Hi everyone. I'm Rachel Peabody, Illinois Soybean Association's Communications Manager, and I'm really excited to be on FFA's page today to do a Facebook Live and to talk about my career path and ag communications and any questions you might have for me. So feel free to use the chat box and send me some questions, and I'll be happy to answer those. So as I said, my name is Rachel Peabody. I live in Taylorville, Illinois, and actually I was a member of Taylorville FFA growing up. So I'm really lucky that I get to be back in my hometown, um, getting to raise my family here and future Taylorville FFA members. So that's really exciting for me. And as I said, I really want to say thank you to Illinois Association FFA for inviting me to do this. I love that organization. It did so much for me personally as a student. And Miss Megan Coy, who actually invited me to do this, we were section officers together back in 2003, 2004. So always really fun to see how those relationships you make in FFA continue almost 20 years later. So really, really exciting. So I guess I'll go ahead and dive a little bit into, my career path in ag communications and how I kind of got into my position at Illinois Soybean Association. So I guess I'll start kind of at the very beginning. For me, I always knew I was really passionate about agriculture. I grew up outside of a small town, always had a deep appreciation for it. Grew up in 4-H and FFA. To me, it was kind of a no-brainer. So I was really excited to go ahead and kind of pursue a career path there. From a communication standpoint, that was also kind of a no-brainer for me. If you knew me as a kid and if you knew me in FFA, you knew that I loved creating relationships, meeting people, public speaking, writing, all those things were always in my wheelhouse. And so I think that's kind of maybe one of my biggest pieces of advice to students today is if you have a natural inclination and if you're naturally gifted at things, follow those and see where they take you. Because in my example, I didn't know anybody who worked in ag communications back in the early 2000s, but I had a feeling that I would be really good at that. And I'm really lucky that I followed my gut because it's been probably one of the best decisions I've ever made with my life. And it's really given me an awesome career that I love every day and that I'm really proud to have. I've got some questions coming in. One from Emma Coons. What advice do you have for students wanting to go into my career path? I would say for ag communications bound students, one, look at the program options that are out there. There are a lot of really great schools that have ag communications programs, and all of them probably offer something that maybe just appeals just a little bit more to you and maybe feels like that's the right spot for you. For me, that was the University of Illinois and their ag communications program. And then I would also say if you're interested in ag communications, be a person that reads a lot, be a person that consumes a lot of media, be a person that writes every day, be a person that you hone in on your public speaking skill sets and your networking skill sets and your social media skill sets. That's such an asset in today's communications world. Be a person that does those things every day and just makes it part of kind of who you are. And that'll really set you up for success if you want to go into communications. Emma, another great question you just asked. What's my favorite part of my job? 100%. My favorite thing that I do is working with farmers, and in my current role, our farmer board members at the Illinois Soybean Association. For me, it's always about the farmer, the end user, kind of getting back out in the field. That's really why I think I'm drawn to my career and why I love it. I grew up around farmers. I have such a deep appreciation for what they do. And I feel in my current role, I'm honored to be able to be the person that gets to tell their stories. And I think that's a really cool thing that I get to do. So 100%, anything that I can do with my farmer audience is my absolute favorite thing. I always say a day that I get to spend out in the career or out in the field or out on the farm, that's 100% better than a day in the office for me. And so that's just kind of what I prefer to do. Julia Kirchhoff, she asked, what's a typical day in my job? As a communicator, you'll find that there's not a lot of typical days. There's a lot of days you feel like you're a jack of all trades. You might start off the morning writing a press release, and you might end the day handling something with crisis communications that just popped up, like COVID-19. or you might find yourself planning an event like Farm Progress Show, or preparing a farmer for an interview, something like that. So it's a whole grab bag of things that I touch throughout the day. So a lot of days aren't very typical. I think for communications too, it's a nice balance of having days where I have to be in the office behind a computer doing things, but then there's also a lot of days where I get to be out in the world. So whether that's being on farm with somebody or being at an event, I get a lot of those days as well. So I feel like I get a lot of diversity to my schedule. Kyra Moyer asked, where did I go to college and what are my typical work hours? So I actually started out at a junior college. I went through an ag transfer program at Lakeland in Mattoon. If anybody is undecided on what to do with a college career path, I really encourage you to kind of look at the junior college system in Illinois, particularly ag transfer programs. There's a lot of really good options out there. And then for my ag transfer degree, I went to the University of Illinois and majored in ag communications. Typical work hours, that's a fun one. I would say the vast majority of my time is very typical, so 8 to 4. And I love that about my job, that I can still have kind of some flexibility or have some kind of schedule there. Because as you guys get into your careers and have families and things like that, you'll really appreciate that. But also, the thing with there's in our industry, particularly in agriculture, there's certain times a year where you travel and where you're at industry meetings. And so there are certainly a lot of days where it's not 8 to 5. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind, particularly with communications. It can kind of ebb and flow there as well. Margaret asked me, did you have any fears or reservations before starting your job? And how did you work through them? That's a really good question. I think when I was right out of college, you always wonder right before you're starting that first, I would say, real world job, is if you don't know if 100% if your classroom training will translate necessarily to instant job performance. And let me tell you, there's a lot of things you're going to learn those first couple of years on the job in that role. And that can be a little daunting at first. You certainly don't come out of college with 100% of your skill set and professional ability yet. That's something that you kind of got to hone your craft and learn. So that can be a little daunting, I think, when you get started. And how do you work through them? I think the biggest thing is just kind of committing to yourself that you want to be better than you were the day before. And so kind of knowing that being a professional, it's about learning every day. I've been into my AgCom career over 10 years now, and I still learn every day. And I still find things that I want to learn how to do better, and I figure out a way to do that. And so I think that's just a good challenge to kind of take with you wherever you go. Jennifer Waters says, tell us about all the travel you get to do with your job too. So I'm really lucky that I have a job that lets me represent the soybean industry at different agricultural events. So for example, Commodity Classic is a big industry event for agriculture. I get to go down there with my board members every year. Also for soybeans, as you can imagine, trade is a really big thing for us. 60% of the Illinois soybean crop is actually exported. So that means that we are a really important crop when we look at the globe and all the different countries that receive our soybeans. And so it's really important that we maintain those relationships and figure out what those end buyers need so that we as Illinois soybean farmers can supply that. And so sometimes I get to go with our board members on what we call trade missions, where we go and work on those relationships with some of our global purchasers and talk about the products that they receive and kind of strengthen those relationships so that we can make sure that those Illinois soybean trade routes are still really going strong. So that's exciting for me too. And then, it's just there's a lot of other things that we do. Whether that means we want to take farmers and let's say go down to the Gulf of Mexico to look at that, to learn about the hypoxic zone. And so we can learn about what runoff in the Mississippi River actually translates down into New Orleans. And so sometimes we do trips like that as kind of a go and see kind of approach, just so Illinois farmers can kind of understand the whole impact of the system and what we're doing. Julia asked a fun question. How is COVID-19 affecting your job? Well, the biggest thing that's affected my job, as you can imagine, I'm broadcasting today from my house and not an office. So our ISA office, we are closed for visitors and everybody is working remotely, but definitely feel very blessed that I get to work remotely. And so I am still kind of keeping my 8 to 4 o'clock schedule here in my house, but that's the first thing. But then also from a COVID-19 perspective, communicators are always on that first line of defense whenever a crisis hits. People look to communicators to, tell them what's going on and to help address the crisis. And so whenever COVID-19 really started to heat up, particularly for Illinois and the ag industry, we were heavily involved as a communications team in getting resources out to farmers, helping answering questions that they might have, putting resources on our website so that they can easily get information that they might need, and then just kind of keeping those lines of communication open so that we're certainly addressing the issue and making farmers aware that they can come to ISA if they have questions about how the soybean industry might be impacted. Taylor Hartkey, first off, go Lakers. Okay, so she must be a Lakeland student or from that area. Have any suggestions on establishing those networks or identifying ag communications internships? That's a great question. From a network perspective, I would say anytime you are in a professional setting, you should be networking. So if you've got a blue FFA jacket on and you're at a meeting, just start talking to people. Introduce yourself, learn about who they are, and you'll find a whole lot of information out about them, and that's how you kind of start creating these pathways. But you might say, I really am interested in ag communications, and they'll say, my cousin is in ag communications and she works at Bayer or something like that, and that's how those kind of relationships kind of start, and you just keep building them from there. Ag communication internships, I would say lean heavily on your college ag comm program that you might be in. Usually your professors will have a really good understanding of what your skill sets are and where you might be really well suited. And ag communicators of tomorrow, those types of clubs, those would be really good resources to look at as well. Jay Solomonson, what are the biggest challenges you face in your career? I would say probably the biggest challenges as a communicator is kind of like I said before, you're always kind of that first line of defense. So communicate, if something's really going to hit or pop or something's going to happen, a communicator has to, if you don't know about it first, you've got to be brought up to speed pretty quickly so that you can help others get up to speed on that issue. And so those types of situations can be high pressure. You have to, if you find yourself, some people thrive in those situations like I do. I love that type of work, but it's not for everyone. So there can be moments of high pressure when you're in a communications type position. I think one of the other challenges as a communicator is, I've always said this, you have to be a person who knows a little bit about everything. So if you're out talking to a farmer, you need to know a little bit about everything that they're doing. Or when you look at the soybean industry, you need to know a little bit about everything that it's touching. Nobody expects you to be the expert 100% of the time on every topic, right? But you have to have some familiarity with what's going on globally in your industry. And I think that can also be kind of a challenge. It's something that I think a communicator is always trying to absorb and learn as much as they can about every facet of the business, so that you can really be an asset to your organization because you know those things. Logan asked, have you visited other states through your job? I definitely have, Logan. I think I'm almost up to early or low 40s, I think. So I've seen most of the country, whether that be through ISA or some of the other positions I've had before that. So ag is a really awesome industry. You do get to travel to a lot of places and see how farming and agriculture works across the country and across the globe. Adam, so where does the funding come from to be able to take farmers on these go and see learning trips? Great question. So ISA is a checkoff organization. So every time you sell soybeans in Illinois, you pay into the checkoff. And so it's very strategic on how we decide where we're going to go on trips. We don't take a whole lot of them because of that, because we want to make sure that we're really making high impact decisions and putting those farmer checkoff dollars to good use, and that we're really, taking board members who have a vested interest in a topic and going somewhere where we're really trying to learn a lot of information that we can bring back and put to use to Illinois soybean farmers so that we can make them more knowledgeable and more profitable in the long run. Teach Ag Squad. So where do you see career opportunities and growth in the ag industry? Well, I guess I'll just speak particularly for ag communications. I think there's a ton of growth in the ag industry, or in ag communications industry, particularly when I look at social and digital communications. That's becoming even more and more every year, as you can imagine, a skill set that communicators need to have, and that's ever evolving. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think there's a lot of opportunity across the ag spectrum in data analytics. So kind of understanding who those end audiences are, the plethora of data that we have on those people, and how to be able to leverage that for everybody's benefit. And then also, I just think ag in general is just such an area for career growth, just because we know that it's such a foundational industry for our country. And we don't see that slowing down. And we need really strong professionals to be able to come into this industry with passion and to fill those roles and to keep us thriving for the next generation. So I think that's a really exciting challenge that we've got. Charlie, so what does an average day look like when I am in an office? It's not, maybe not real exciting. As a person that has to be on the front end of a lot of things, you can imagine I'm in a lot of meetings. I'm on a lot of calls. I'm always glued to email and my phone so that people can always get a hold of me. As a communicator, you always have to be available whenever something is hitting, which is basically all the time. So it's just really being connected and spending a lot of time with those different stakeholders that I get to work with, making sure that my communications are supporting whatever efforts they're doing within the organization. Any other questions? All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's time today. It was fun talking to you all about ag communications. I hope you guys, if you have any other questions about that as a career path, by all means, reach out to me. My information is on the Illinois Soybean website. And again, this is Rachel Peabody with the Illinois Soybean Association. Thank you.